so we'll get the meeting going. Just before we move into the formal part, can I just remind everybody, or if you don't know, that it's customary to film meetings of the planning committee. Now, if there's anybody who may be speaking this evening, doesn't want to be filmed, if they could just let Katie here on the corner know, we'll make sure you're not filmed. Doesn't apply to any of the members of the planning committee though. Okay, welcome to the first meeting of the new municipal year. Have we got any apologies for absence, Katie? Okay, thanks. I've not got any urgent business before me. Has there any members got declarations of interest regarding any of the items this evening? No? Okay. I've not received any public questions.
Chair?
Yes?
Right. One of the applications, I have visited the site in my role as Mayor of Oldham, but I haven't predetermined the decision, or I didn't know the application was coming through. So I don't think so.
That's fine. That's
I'll highlight it.
That's absolutely fine. In fact, many of us have probably visited most of these sites. Okay. For those who were at the last meeting, do I have a mover and seconder for the minutes, please? Okay, moved and second. Councillor Hudson moved, Councillor Ali seconded it. So we'll move into the formal part of the meeting. Now, what we will do this evening, we've got a lot of speakers here and we've got members of the public, so we're going to take items that have got speakers and public interest first, so we don't keep everybody in a hot room for too long. We're going to take item 11 first. This is land at the junction of Wildmoor Avenue and Lees New Road. We have 3 speakers. We have an objector, we have the applicant and a ward councillor. Again, just to remind, or for those who don't know, the objector and the applicant have 3 minutes to address the committee. We'll give you a reminder when you've 30 seconds left. May seem a bit abrupt, but it's just to remind you of 30 seconds. After you've finished speaking, there's an opportunity for the members of the committee to ask any questions about what you've said, if they wish. The ward councillor is not limited to 3 minutes, but we always ask that they be as concise as possible. And at the chair's discretion, can stop them at any time if he feels that they've overstepped the mark a little, which doesn't usually happen. Okay, and I haven't actually welcomed the new members of the committee this evening, so welcome to the planning committee, and I'm sure you'll enjoy the experience. Okay, before I invite the first speaker, which is an objector, and that's Joanne Horton, can I just ask the case officer to give us a brief overview of the issue before us?
That's great, thank you, Chair. This application for advertisement consent is for a freestanding totem sign positioned on a parcel of open land. The land is bound by Covert Road, Wildmoor Avenue and Lees New Road on the edge of Holts. This sign shows a position of the freestanding sign, which shows a degree of spaciousness from the highway edge. As this application is retrospective, members will note that part of the sign has been erected and is covered by blue sheeting, which can be seen in the pictures that show the main views of the site. The proposed sign is set on a stone plinth and measures 3.4 metres in height, 1.9 metres in width, which includes the stone wall, and is 600 millimetres in depth. An application for advertisement consent should be subject to control only in the interests of amenity and public safety. As such, it is considered the overall height, massing and design, including its plinth and stone support, is considered to be acceptable in the interest of amenity and not be a significant deviation or detract from the existing views and vistas along Lees New Road and Wildmoor Avenue. Taken into account the setback from the edge of the highway, it is considered there is a sufficient degree of visibility for vehicles on the approach to and using the mini roundabout at the junction of Lees New Road and Wildmoor Avenue. Taking all the factors of the recommendation report into account, this application is recommended for approval. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, could I invite Joanne Hoyton to... Joanne, when you're ready, there's a little button on the microphone. It'll turn red and you start speaking. As I said, we'll remind you when you've 30 seconds. So, in your own time.
Okay, everyone can hear me. Okay. I'm here to represent myself, my neighbours present, and 124 other local residents who signed this petition, who strongly object to the planned structure. Firstly, the sign, or in fact the advertisement, is not in keeping with the natural environment. This is a plastic sign with a proposal for a brick wall, which is juxtaposed by grass verges and trees against a backdrop of hills and countryside landscape on a designated amenity green space. Aside from how aesthetically deeply unpleasing this is, no justification has been given as to why such unnatural and environmentally damaging materials were chosen. The sign is intrusive and a distinct deviation to the surrounding landscape. We strongly object to the location of the sign on Covert Road, which FCHO have stated is the gateway to the estate. In the 10 years that I have lived here, I have never heard Covert Road referenced as this, nor can I find this in any written material. It also seems an unusual location given none of the services on the estate are located here, and that a previous sign was in fact located at near Birches Parade, where services can be found. It has been recognised as a result of this retrospective planning application that the sign is indeed overwhelmingly an advertisement and not a welcome sign. Whilst FCHO does have a very significant amount of housing stock on Holt, Covert Road is actually one of the areas with the least FCHO properties, and I'm aware that at least the first 5 houses on this road in direct sight of the advertisement are privately owned. This is not only misleading but capitalises on the work we have done to maintain our properties, whilst other areas of the estate are in disarray, and this feels rather underhand. Further concerns expressed by residents include the structure becoming a target for graffiti, vandalism and an attraction for antisocial behaviour and crime, as evidenced around other structures in the area, as well as a distraction for motorists. Furthermore, I am concerned that more advertisements and unsightly structures will appear should this planning application be successful. Myself and my neighbours, particularly my neighbour's daughter, have faced stigma as a result of living on what is already known as a council estate. But we like where we live, and many of us worked hard to own our own properties, which I am sure you will agree is encouraged and valued in this society. The objection of this advertisement does not, as it been claimed by FCHO staff, make us prejudiced, quite the opposite, as we are usually the victim of this type of behaviour. We fear the branding of the estate in this way will lead to further stigma and prejudice. I and none of my neighbours here were consulted about this structure, and the way in which FCHO have tried to mask and minimise the concerns of non-FCHO residents is greatly insulting. We see no benefits to residents from this structure. For all the reasons stated, it is an unwelcome, unsightly, out of place and misleading advertisement which serves no purpose to the community in this location.
Expertly done. Just 1 second, Joanne. Any questions? Councillor Hartness.
Yeah, I was just going to ask, is there any other sort of tall street furniture?
Sorry to interrupt, Councillor Hartness. Can I just remind the members to please use the microphones?
Oh, there we are. Yeah, just wanted to know, is there any other sort of tall street furniture around that area which you could
There is, I don't know what you class as street furniture, but just across the road from it is some metal structures which are obviously used for gas or electricity or something like that. They have been graffitied, and there are young people that frequently climb on those. Similarly, down Lees New Road, young people climb on the structures there.
It's generally quite open.
Other than that, it's completely open, and that's on a line of the proposed structure is on a line of trees. Yeah.
Okay, thanks. Any more questions? No? Thank you very much indeed. Okay, can I ask Wayne Shorrocks, who is speaking on behalf of the applicant? Again, sir, you've got 3 minutes. Remind you when you've 30 seconds.
Hello, my name is Wayne Shorrocks, Project Officer within First Choice Homes and designer of the Gateway. The Gateway feature has been designed purely and simply as an entrance feature sited on First Choice Homes grass verge land. It is still our review that it isn't an advertisement. No advertisement is being made by way of displaying any contact numbers, emails, or contact details. All highways, dimensions and sightline rulings have been adhered to. Also, maximum distances away from any property sightlines were also reciprocated so that the gateway would not be intrusive to any property. The gateway is constructed of cast aluminium and powder coated with white, complete with green and purple First Choice Homes lettering and logo. The gateway supports the words "Welcome to Holts Village" on the front side and "Take Care" on the reverse. The gateway also consists of local Oldham stone, a dry walling method approximately 1/3 of the structure. Then the gateway is to be surrounded by flower beds maintained by First Choice Grounds maintenance team. Adjacent dilapidated public seating is also part of the renewal programme to uplift the main entrance to Holts Village. This gateway is also being rolled out as part of a new way of encouraging people to be proud of their communities and supporting building stronger communities. First Choice Homes are investing over £2 million in the regeneration of Holts Village. This involves environmental works to provide new fencing lines to all First Choice Homes boundaries, inclusive of all shared boundary lines. This financial commitment is designed to uplift the community for all within, giving pride and encouraging shared well-being. Gates to fronts and rears of boundaries are also being replaced together with pathways upgrades. The environmental project benefits and add values to all those located on Holts Village. Other environmental projects include development of open spaces, drainage solution for problematic flood areas, increased parking, community gardens have been created, litter picking schemes and skips sited by First Choice Homes free of charge to encourage clean and tidy environments. New black cast iron works also being rolled out throughout the village, providing safety rails to high-risk areas. The gateway is just one aspect of this hive of activity to build upon stronger communities. First Choice Homes also supports a hub on the Higher Birches Parade. The village has a hive of First Choice activities on a daily basis. You will see First Choice Home property repairs vans making essential repairs and maintenance of properties. We at First Choice Homes are proud of the current mood within the estate due to the heavy investment and feel proud to display the welcome feature. Once and surrounded with flower beds, we would hope that all those that do not share the same vision may change their minds and enter into the spirit of stronger community.
Okay, thank you. Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much. No, you are. Are there any questions? Yeah, it's Councillor Kumar.
Yeah, hi. Just what we heard from the previous speaker as well.
Yes.
There was a sign further up towards Birches Parade. What was the reason behind relocating the sign down to this site?
Because it's at the main entrance to the Holts Village. There's also a bench that's located adjacent to the gateway and a bus stop. It is the main entrance onto the village, and we're also upgrading the seating around there. And we wanted to create a feature and a welcome sign, and literally provide a flower bed as well to this area, and just give it an uplift.
Yeah. The original sign that was towards Birches Parade, where all the shops are.
Yeah.
Is that sign going to still remain there, or because obviously that's where the post office is?
We've got a pointer sign which gives directions to streets and amenities within the village. That would be upgraded as just part of the environmental scheme. But the gateway is simply a welcome sign to Holts Village. So in answer to the question, with the sign it's not a sign, it's a welcome sign. It's a welcome sign at the entrance.
Sorry, just to keep coming back there. So am I right in thinking that you'll have two signs now, if this was on this?
No, there'll be one sign. One First Choice Homes gateway, and the other sign that you're referring to is actually just a direction sign.
Would they both have First Choice Homes logos on?
On the finger sign, there would be a small motif, as is with the seat that we're providing. The bench, it just has the FCHO logo. That's all it has.
Thank you for that.
Okay, I think I noticed the microphones are quite loud. They must have put new batteries in them for they do. So we're getting feedback. I know it's difficult, but anybody who's using the microphone, if you could please just remember to switch it off when you're finished, and we'll avoid the feedback situation that we get. It can be awkward, but if we could just manage that. Okay, I've got another question, Councillor Akhtar.
Thank you, Chair. I know you didn't have to submit an application for planning to carry the works out, but I'm a bit intrigued to find out why a planning application wasn't submitted prior to the work being carried out.
We didn't feel it was an advertisement, and we didn't think advertisement consent was required. We did actually lobby some discussions with the local planning officers and called into Civic Centre to discuss the proposal. It wasn't until we actually located the holding down bolts and put the first part of the sign in place that we started to receive some objections. In view of the objections, we then processed the full planning application in the recommendation of the planning officer.
I think it's very commendable that First Choice Homes should be taking an interest in any part of the Metro of Oldham Borough. But I can't, in my view, where has this come from, this desire to have this? Because I know a lot of people on Holts, and there doesn't seem to be the same desire as you have, that what it will do. I know what it's supposed to do, because you've said it, but I think in reality, we do know from the rest of the area what it will actually do. And it will be one more thing to vandalise. And I do think it spoils the openness of the thing. And I can't understand whose idea it were. One presumes First Choice Homes listen to the tenants and their associations and the representations are made. Well, has this been made by anybody from the tenants? Because I can't find anybody who really likes it. I may be wrong.
Well, the tenants are in support of it. We have the hub on near Birches Parade. We've received a lot of information, and also on Facebook of like what's happened to our gateway. Why is our gate? Why is the work stopped? We're receiving a lot of support for it. That call into the hub on a daily basis. On Holts Village, we have 700 properties.
Explain to me what the hub is. I'm very ignorant when it comes to computers and stuff, you know. I talk to folk me and go around and see it. So you have to tell me what the hub is.
The hub is a focal point within the village where tenants and householders both can share ideas. There's community events, there's crime prevention discussions, and there's also linked in with Manchester Metropolitan Police. It basically is a hub for all to share ideas and share community events, and that's where we've actually had 3 committee meetings to discuss at the gateway, and it was well received.
How many people turned up?
Over 3 events, we'd have something like in the order of 60 people, and we had 1 complaint.
Okay, thanks. Are there any more questions? No? Okay, thank you. Can I ask Councillor Harrison to address the committee?
I'm here to speak on behalf of the Holts residents who've actually been in direct contact with the Alexandra Ward councillors. A few weeks ago, a number of people contacted Councillor Mushtaq directly, and he wasn't sure whether he'd be able to be here tonight, so I said I would definitely be able to be here, so I would be able to speak. And there are many ways of strengthening communities. It doesn't need signs like this. The hub itself, John, is a very effective way of strengthening the community. And yes, it is supported by First Choice Homes, but there are many other partners in there as well. So we actually sent a flyer around much of the ward just to try and get people's views on this. And not every single person was against it, I'll admit that, but the majority, the vast majority, were against it for various reasons. And then, of course, there were the 124 people who signed the petition, and I believe other people have objected directly to the planning department. So all the people that we've spoken to have said that they weren't consulted and they don't know anybody who was consulted, and they've taken offence at the fact that it was erected without planning permission, and how a big organisation like First Choice Homes wouldn't know that it needed planning permission for this. Leaves me just a little aghast. This start of it was erected some time ago, and it had to be covered up in this blue PVC that you'll have seen on the picture. So it's already made that corner look ugly and look an eyesore. And it's had a big negative impact, especially on those who live near it. And it's on a really beautiful sweeping bank of grass that doesn't need any enhancement. It's beautiful in its own right. The views from it are beautiful. And this sign is completely intrusive into it. And it ruins, to our view, to the minds of the people who've contacted us, it ruins that aspect as you're entering Holt's village. And there has been a raising of esteem in the village. There is a more settled feel. Because of the use of the term Holt's village, it brings a feeling of neighbourliness. But some residents and their families have been very badly impacted, to the point that some of them have said that their health has suffered. And to say that it's not an advertisement when it's going to have the First Choice Home logo on it, I'm not sure where that comes from. And it's inappropriate at the gateway to Holt's because the housing is very mixed. There's a very significant number of housing and Care 21 bungalows for older people. There's a large number of private housing, owner-occupiers, private landlords, as well as First Choice Homes. And some of the people who've contacted us to say they don't want the sign are First Choice Homes tenants. So there are fears, as already been mentioned, that the sign will become a magnet for graffiti, antisocial behaviour, a danger for children climbing on it and so forth. I mean, you can make your own mind up about those because children will climb, but why give them something extra to do it on? I read the report on the website this morning, and it's being compared with lampposts, more or less saying lampposts are intrusive into the environment. Lampposts are a normal part of street scene. This is a large designed sign that is intended to draw attention. Lampposts are there to light our streets, to keep us safe. This is there to draw people's attention, so it can't be compared with lampposts. And I do acknowledge the good work that First Choice Homes does across the whole borough. They've done some very significant work, not just in housing, in social care and all kinds of things. But on this occasion, we do believe that they've got it wrong. It's inappropriate. It's not wanted by a lot of people, especially the ones living nearest to it. And it's a blot on an otherwise pleasant landscape that does have these beautiful views. So it wouldn't be a welcome feature. It wouldn't be an enhancement. It would take away from that already beautiful piece of land. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Harrison. Any questions? Councillor Kumar.
Thank you, Councillor Harrison. We've just heard from the previous speaker regarding the sign, but plus the flower bed and the bench. To enhance the area, if the flower bed and the bench were to go in without the sign, do you think the residents would appreciate that initiative by First Choice Homes?
Well, that's something, again, I think we would ask people, you know, their opinion before doing it. But to my mind, it's a natural piece of land. It doesn't need, it's almost like gilding the lily in a way, to add anything in there. I don't know if the members have been able to go and have a look, but it is, as you turn in, come off Abbey Hills Road and sweep in, it's a big sweeping in area. It looks really attractive. It doesn't need an enhancement. Any attempt at an enhancement would have the opposite effect.
There's no more questions, thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay. We'll open it for debate. Anybody got a comment, Councillor Hartness?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I suppose there's a couple of different things. One, there was a reference to consultation, so perhaps one of the officers can make a comment on what the consultation, who was consulted in the process as well. I know, you know, it's not quite as, you know, there's a statutory thing, so perhaps the officer can make a comment on that. But I think it's built on from Councillor Harrington mentioned about lampposts being compared to this sign in terms of the street scene and so on. I think my concern at the moment is relating to this public safety, so I wondered whether we could have some comments, because the highways officer hasn't commented on this application, and this sort of it's in terms of, I suppose, the, you know, how far set back it is, because it does sort of think it does seem to be right on the corner, and you know, the report suggests that it's sufficiently set back, but the last two of the speakers tonight would seem to suggest otherwise. So I've still got a bit of a concern regarding the public safety on this.
Yeah. So, through you, Chair. I think when the references were being made to consultation, they were in reference to FCHO carrying out consultation themselves on the estate. In terms of our dealing with the advertisement consent application that we've got in at the moment, the residents of properties within the immediate vicinity of the site were notified and site notice displayed. So I think the applicant is saying that there's a wider consultation on the estate that they happen to carry out on that. In terms of the lamppost, do you want to show the picture again? The lampposts obviously are in themselves are tall features, so they are an element of that. And quite rightly, Councillor Harrison was talking about the openness of that area. But as you can even see from this aspect of it, in addition to the trees which have an impact, the natural impact, clearly there are, it's a road network, so clearly there are quite dominant lamppost features on there. So it's not the equivalent of an area of openness in that sense, but obviously it does add to that potential clutter if that's the conclusion you would reach. But because those features are there, our view is that it isn't a kind of out of position type structure. There are other features that are quite tall in the locality. In terms of public safety, I'm not sure if this was an element. Obviously you mentioned the highway, and I'll ask Wendy to comment on that. In terms of public safety, there has been reference to antisocial behaviour, and I just have to make the point that if that was to form an element of concern, there needs to be evidence that that is likely to cause problems in the area, and we're not aware that there is that evidence. I think we've had some reference to young people milling about the area, but I'm not aware that, for instance, that the existing structure that's there has been vandalised, has been subject to any maltreatment in the time that it's been there. I mean, quite often, again, the enhancements of the area, and there's talk about benches being introduced and so on. Any of these features can obviously have a potential adverse impact if they attract the wrong type of people, but by the same motive, they do provide an area where people can all meet and so on, and they provide a feature in that area. So anything could potentially be vandalised. I don't think that that is a justifiable reason to object. I think the focus has to be that character of the area and how it would impact on that. Just finally, and it's just adding a point, it's not a question that's asked, but somebody might ask, the confusion over this being an advertisement. It's an advertisement, and in terms of the regulations, that doesn't mean in the kind of short sense of advertising goods and so on. An advertisement can be a sign, it can be a direction feature and so on. So a road sign, in planning terms, is an advertisement. So again, the fact that it's got logo on there in itself is not necessarily relevant in terms of the assessment of the structure and its impact on the area. Wendy. Okay.
Yeah. So when I make an assessment on the implications on highway safety on signs, I looked at the visibility at the junction and whether the sign would obstruct that visibility, and it absolutely does not obstruct visibility, either at that junction or at the Covert Road junction.
Okay, we've got two speakers, Councillor Hudson and then Councillor Brownridge.
Well, I can't find any planning reason why I could object to this on planning grounds, but I just think, Chairman, at a time when it's very sensitive at national and local politics with people, we're going to be confronted with people who say, in common sense terms, is this necessary? To beautify areas, I agree with flower beds and forms and things everywhere in the Metropolitan District, but I don't think we could justify this. I can't understand. I'm not on the First Choice Homes Board. If I were, I'd have said something about this before it's even got to this stage, because to me it's unnecessary. They do need help in these areas, but this isn't the kind of thing that's going to help them in any way. It's a silly thing to do, Chairman. So I just think in common sense terms, I can't bring myself to support it, but in planning terms, I do realise the planning officer has a terrible job, because in planning terms, if we look at it, it's not breaking any rules in planning terms. I realise that. But I think in common sense terms, people in Oldham will be asking, is this the best thing to do for Holts or even for Oldham? And the answer is no.
Thank you, Chair. So the answer is we have to look at this in two grounds, public safety and amenity. We've dismissed public safety, I think we can safely say. Now, amenity is very subjective. You can't say something we all agree it affects amenity. It doesn't. My view would be that the people who live there, who know this area, say it's going to have a detrimental effect on their amenity and the amenity of the approach to the estate. Their judgment's just as good as the planning officer's. It's a judgment at the end of the day. And my instinct would be that we should go with the people who live there, because they have a very strong perception of what their local amenity is. If First Choice go to appeal, we might lose. We can't guarantee that the inspector would agree with their definition of amenity. But to me, it seems that we should trust the judgment of the people who actually live there. And if they feel it's detrimental to the amenity, which they see as being open and natural, and all right, obviously there's street furniture there, but this is quite a big structure that they're putting in there that will have an impact on that open vista up towards the open land beyond. And I think if they feel that strongly about it, then I, for one, would be quite happy to support their judgment and say it's detrimental to amenity.
Okay. I think Councillor Brownridge has a point there. There's clearly no highway safety there. There's clearly, and security, really, we couldn't justify refusal on that. It's interesting that DPD Policy 20 is quoted in the officer's report, which mentions the emphasis of purporting high-quality design developments, and goes on to say that they reflect the character and distinctives of the area. And again, as Councillor Brown said, this is a very subjective thing, but the majority of people seem to feel that this will harm the amenity. And I'm going to propose that we turn this down on that ground. Do you have any more speakers, or do I have a second? Okay. Councillor Kumar, did you want to comment?
Well, it's been seconded now, but I was going to second it. But I drive past there every morning to drop my child off at school, and I wholeheartedly agree with Councillor Harrison's comments of it is intrusive to the area. I mean, I've driven past that for over a year now. It's very intrusive to the area. It's made it worse by the blue tarpaulin going over it, because I've seen it before it went on, and it's like a shining light, which I don't think has done it us justice today to have it covered up. We could have done with seeing the actual sign, but I'd go along with the recommendation of refusal.
To be perfectly honest, Councillor Kumar, it shouldn't be there at this point anyway. So, I mean, let's be honest. First Choice Homes are doing some fabulous work around the town, and they need to be encouraged. But I think this may be a lesson, perhaps, to First Choice Homes, to just check before they do things, not only with the regulatory bodies, but with the people that they're well-meaningly trying to help. So, can I have? I'm going to yes. If it comes to an appeal, I will represent the council. So. It has been moved and seconded for refusal, so...
Just to remind members, if you are going to vote against the officer recommendation, you must do so for valid planning reasons, and in the event of appeal you'll be required to provide evidence to substantiate that, because if not, there's a potential that costs could be awarded against the council.
Okay. So can I, this is on grounds of amenity, so can I please have a show of hands for refusal? Okay, against refusal? Okay, refusal it is. Thank you. Okay, we need to move to the next item, which is, we're going to take item number 8. Next, which is Yew Tree Community School. Again, we have 3 speakers, an objector, an applicant and a ward councillor. We'll just have an introduction from the case officer, and then we will invite the speakers to address the committee.
Thank you, Chair. This application relates to Yew Tree Community School in Chadderton. The area of the development is part of the existing playing field adjacent to its northeastern boundary with the school building and adjacent to the car park shown on the slide. Planning permissions is sought for the construction of a multi-use games area with an artificial surface. The proposed pitch is enclosed by a green, 3-metre high Paladin welded mesh fence. The pitch would measure 60 metres in length by 30 metres in width. Officers consider the artificial pitch would result in an improved sporting facility for the school children by providing a playing surface which would not be subject to poor or waterlogged ground conditions. The pitch would also provide a facility which could be used by local sporting clubs, recreational groups, which would benefit the community by providing this all-weather pitch. It is considered the proposed pitch and fence respects the appearance of the school and the wider area. The pitch is not floodlit and as such would not result in light issues for residents which surround the school playing field. Taking into account the proposed hours, naturally limiting its use, it is not considered that the noise from the pitch will be significant enough to outweigh the community benefit of providing a multi-use pitch which will be used by the school children and local sports clubs. taking into account the anticipated level of usage governed by the size and the availability of the car park outside of the school day, it is considered a peak amount of vehicles can be accommodated safely off the public highway. Taking all the factors of the recommendation report into account, the application is recommended for approval. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, first of all, I'll invite Marilyn Camus, who is going to speak as an objector. I think you've probably cottoned on by now the routine. You just press the red button, you've 3 minutes, remind me when you've 30 seconds, and if you could just remember to switch the mic off when you've finished. Okay.
Hi, my name is Marilyn Camus, and I'm speaking on behalf of the 203 residents who have signed the petition presented. Not against the school having an all-weather surface, but quite simply against the community/commercial use, as outlined in the report. Gordon Avenue, which is where I live, has properties which back onto the school field. And in what fine weather we have, we like to enjoy the ability to sit in comfort in our own back gardens, as no doubt members of the committee do. The field is already used by children and others, and the noise is limited both in time and volume. We are all entitled to enjoy our own home, but it is highly unlikely we could continue this enjoyment if there is an open house to the rear, and this applies equally to those properties on Williams Crescent, which also backs onto the field and other neighbouring streets. No doubt, like every other area near to a school, we have to endure the morning drop-off and afternoon pick-up. Parents blocking drives, parking on street corners, parking on pavements, and all of which I am sure you have experienced or had complaints about. To some extent, we've learnt to live with that, but now we are expected to tolerate the potential inconsiderate parking of vehicles, not only of an evening, but also at weekends and bank holidays. This will have a severe impact of the residential amenity in the area. Excuse me. Now let me give you the route vehicles have to take to access the field. Initially, vehicles must travel along Lancaster Street. On this street are terrace properties only, and no house has a drive, and vehicles park on both sides of the road. If users park along this road, there will be an impact on residential amenity. You then turn left onto Alcester Street, which has been made one way for highway safety reasons. Again, none of these properties have drives, and users of the field run the risk of impacting on residential amenities, and at the end of this road we come to Arden Street. The properties on the left-hand side are again without drives, so once again there would be an impact on residential amenity. Of course, what some may choose to do is turn right into Gordon Avenue, which is a cul-de-sac. While some houses have a drive, we already have vehicles blocking drives, etc. Why should we have to live with this 7 days a week? Would you like to do so? I hope you will support the residents, who I would say don't seek to disrupt what the school did in school time, but would simply like to enjoy their own home. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Are there any questions? No? Yeah, Councillor Ollie.
Yeah, hi Marilyn. Yeah, so I mean, just to sort of, from my understanding really, are you sort of okay with the, with the proposed development during school hours, or you're just not happy with the extended hours?
That's correct.
No, okay.
May I just extend on that a little bit? Is it the weekend use particularly, or the evening use prior to 7 p.m. in the summer months? What exactly is it that the residents are objecting?
It's the all out of hours from the school.
So in the evening?
Nobody objects to the kids having it at all. Okay. It's just the out of hours and the horrendous parking.
And in terms of health and well-being, obesity in children, are the residents not interested in the health of the community, or is it just about themselves?
Well, no, because they will be playing PE and something at school. That's what schools are there for. They're giving the children the opportunity to be on that pitch all the time now, because it's all weather, so they can be out in it and they're not getting muddy like they did before, so they are going to be able to get more exercise.
Thank you.
Okay, no more questions? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, could I invite Riaz Bhatti, please, who is going to speak on behalf of the applicant.
Evening. I'm Riaz Bhatti. I'm the head of school at Yew Tree Community School. I've been there over 20 years. We're the second largest primary school in Oldham. Very deprived area we serve. We do very well with the children, both academically and on a sporting front. We've just won a football competition today at Radcliffe. I'll share that with you. I'm here really just to share some of the things the school have done to mitigate some of the concerns the local residents have had. I've been in discussion with Councillor Shuttleworth, with local residents. Over the last 18 months to 3 years, we've been looking at improving the facilities at school for the children of the school and the local community. Some of the concerns the residents have got about usage, you can see already there's a fenced off area. At the moment, anyone can use that pitch at any time. So 9 o'clock in the evening, 8 o'clock in the evening, there's free access, and that's happening at the moment. So there's antisocial behaviour that is taking place on the pitch at times. What we've done is put a more rigid fence in place to make it more secure, and that's not on there, but it's within the fenced area. It's a smaller area than the area that's there. So we're not looking at any adult use, just junior football use. There's no changing facilities, there's no lighting facilities, and as there's no lighting, it'll only be used for part of the year after school. Most of you will know by November, December, it's too dark to play after 5 or 6 o'clock. The community use would have to be after 6 o'clock because local clubs are run by volunteer coaches, so they wouldn't be able to do any training before 6 o'clock anyway. I know the parking and traffic isn't an issue. School have worked with the local residents and the local council. The one-way street that was mentioned on Alcester Street, school budget funded half of the works involved in converting that into a one-way street. So again, we've worked with the residents over the years I've been at the school. At the moment, anyone who uses that field, and we have some local clubs who already use the field, have to park on the streets as mentioned. The proposal now is that anyone who uses the new facility will park in the school car park. So actually that will make things better, not worse. Because anyone using it at the moment parks on the road. But further going forward, anyone using the new facility will park on the school grounds. There's plenty of parking. And because we're only looking at about an hour of use, we're not worrying about the swap over of parents from one group to another group. Language and noise, I know, is a concern. Again, we're only looking at using it with FA chartered clubs who have a respect campaign. Any matches would be by an FA registered referee. There'd be club sanctions, early finish due to the lighting. Again, everything we're doing improves the facility and improves the actual usage. It will have less impact for the residents. I think sometimes the information hasn't been shared clearly with some of the local residents. The ones I've spoken to, having had the first information, once they know what's going on, have been very, very favourable.
Thank you very much, sir. Have we got any questions? Councillor Gloucester.
Have the school carried out any form of consultation event? I know you've said that you've discussed it with residents, but have you actually facilitated a full consultation?
No, not a full consultation. We've had plans ongoing. We have spoken to local residents. We've done on our newsletters again to share what we were planning to do. So that's gone out on our newsletters. Like I say, we have over 600 children, which branches right into the community. You can imagine the number of families that we are in contact with. So we have shared as we've gone along our plans.
Okay. It's a laudable venture, isn't it? I have some experience of this type of use in other schools, and I'm really concerned about access. You mentioned the clubs come in. How do you propose to manage the traffic? I'm not quite clear how you would allow people, say at weekends, to access your site. How would you propose to manage that?
We're self-contained, so ultimately my caretaker would open the gates and the car park would then be open. access to the pitch would be through the school, so there'd be no benefit to parking on the street away. You'd have to walk through the school car park to get to the pitch. So that kind of puts to bed anybody worrying about them still parking on the street, because they'd then still walk through the car park to get to it. Just to be clear, it's not a full-size 3G pitch, which you're probably all aware of, which generates tens of thousands, sometimes hundreds of thousands of pounds. This is just one child-sized pitch. It's not a full-size pitch at all. I think the measurements were shared earlier, the 60 metres by 30 metres, which is about just over a third of the size of a pitch. So we're talking, as I said earlier, no adult use, because it's a child-sized pitch, and it's not even a child-size 11-a-side pitch. It's a junior 7-a-side pitch.
Okay, thank you, sir. No more questions? Okay, can I invite Councillor Shuttleworth to address the committee?
Thanks, Chair. Good evening, panel. I'd like to cover some of the detail that's not actually contained within the report. So bear with me, because, as Mr Barchi has said, we did work with the school in 2015 in terms of the congestion on Alcester Street in order to mitigate the potential problems. But I would like to correct one thing. Mr Barchi says he's been consulting with me. Well, it's news to me in terms of this particular application. And I say that because I had to write to the planning office at the end of October, or towards the end of October, to ask if they were aware that work was taking place on the school field. And this followed contact from a resident. And I will quote from an email I received after it had been inspected. This is Abdul Ahmed, who was the officer who went down. And I'm told he visited the site on Friday, 3rd of November, and the contractors were well underway with work to install a 3G pitch. Because of the drilling involved, planning permission is required. However, the 3G pitch does not constitute a change of use. So that was the first knowledge that I had that anything was taking place. And of course what you've got now is a retrospective planning application, because this wasn't actually declared valid, I think, until the beginning of January. Well, let me go back to what Mr Barchi has said in terms of the previous involvement with the school in terms of traffic. There was an issue because there were 3 roads that came together. So naturally, there would be problems. And we requested an inspection by the highways team to look at the facility. And they made a recommendation that Alcester Street should be turned into a one-way route. And I'm just looking for some figures I thought I had. And we agreed it, and as Mr Barchi rightly says, the school paid half and the district executive paid half in order to alleviate the problems. So Alcester Street, you go from Lancaster Street, as Mrs Camus was saying, down Alcester Street and you meet Arden Street, and away you go. And I received contact from one of the residents who's here tonight, I won't mention his name, which says, turning to Alcester Street, Mr X informs me that some vehicles are ignoring the no entry sign at Arden / Alcester Street junction and driving against the flow of traffic. He claims a number of these are vans which go to the school. So I asked the officer if he could do a traffic survey. That survey was conducted in June 2016. So let me give you details of some of the vehicles, and this is the nub of the problem. It's the volume of traffic during the day that goes around Lancaster Street, Alcester Street and Arden Street, because they have to follow that flow and can accept that some of these will be local traffic. Well, these are the numbers. Monday 315, Tuesday 331, Wednesday 390, 335, 328, and you go the following week 329, 336, 370, 429, and there must have been a lot of breakdowns, 173. Now, you also look at the number of vehicles that are going the wrong way in June. On a Monday 2, Tuesday 1, Wednesday 9, Thursday 0, Friday 6. There remains a highway problem in this particular area, and that was reported to police as traffic offences. So there's nothing to say that this is going to be any easier for residents. And we can talk all we want in terms of how many car parking spaces there are. It's whether the users of the facility actually decide to go onto the car park. Because at Alcester Street, on part of it, the pavement is quite wide. So the chances are that people are not going to use the car park, they're actually going to start parking on the wide pavement because it's easier. Also, while we talk about the number of car parking spaces within the school, what isn't said is there are 4 or 5 minibuses that already take up some of those spaces. So there is an issue. And again, this isn't against the school or what they want to do with the school children, nor is it against them playing competitive matches against other schools just after school time, like many of us used to enjoy and still have a memory of. It is about the impact of an evening and of a weekend and bank holidays. Now, I'll try to get some information to be able to speak to the residents about it, and Richard was kind enough to provide the information. So let me tell you what was made known to me on the 30th of April, which isn't that long ago. And this is Richard's email. I've asked the applicant further questions for clarification purposes and to alleviate concerns expressed by local residents. The applicant's responses are in italics. The question 1 was, what are the proposed hours of use of the mugger? And the answer was daylight hours, Monday to Friday. Contrast that now with what's on your agenda, where it says 0800 to 1900 Monday to Friday, you've got Saturdays, you've got Sundays, and you've got bank holidays. So there's one change. Now, looking at the report itself, it does say here that there have been various minor applications associated with the school. Well, let me tell you what some of those minor applications were and consider what is there before you now. November 2013, a proposal, installation of 4 3G all-weather sport pitches, 2 associated works, including porter cabin, changing facilities, erection of fencing, 3 installation of artificial lighting. The application was withdrawn by the school. Application received 28th of August 2014. Alterations to existing football pitch to create 1 3G pitch with associated works, including the erection of floodlighting, a ball stop fence, and the siting of a porter cabin to provide changing facilities. Withdrawn by applicant. May 2015, alterations to existing football pitch to create 1 3G pitch with associated works, including the erection of floodlighting, a ball stop fence, and the siting of a porter cabin to provide changing facilities. So what no one can deny is that the school would have been aware of their obligations in terms of a 3G pitch, because they made such an application on 3 occasions and withdrew them. So the question is, why didn't you follow the same process with this particular application? Looking also at the report on page 24, of course it just says publicity for 2 representations, but as you know from the late list, 203 people signed a petition against the proposal, not for the all-weather pitch, I will reiterate, not for the all-weather pitch, not for the school, but in terms of the community and commercial aspects, which they believe will create problems. The report, and we hear it quite often, says significant benefits to the community, which will benefit the school and external community users, including local clubs, with a significant benefit to the community, benefits to the school and the wider community. Where is the benefit consideration for those who live on Lancaster, Alcester, Arden and Gordon? The answer is none, because everybody ignores the residents. And they are, as you will see from that, properties that surround that playing field and that particular site. They are entitled to enjoy their property without traffic going up and down all the time. Now, members know that I've sent through to you some images that I've taken of the school. You know, we talk about site security, and, you know, Mr. Barty's made reference to it. Well, I understand that one of the pictures that I've sent you where somebody has already taken out a chunk of fencing has been repaired today. That was only taken on Friday. It's been repaired today. Those of you who've ever seen the film Escapes of Victory, you know, the war film with the football where they dig under the fence, apparently that's happening here. Kids are actually going under the fence and going into the 3G. There is no security on that particular area that will keep those who wish to get in out of the place. There's also the talk that, you know, when it comes to traffic management, you know, who's going to be responsible? Well, you've heard Mr. Barty say the caretaker will be responsible. The caretaker is not going to be there from 8 o'clock in the morning till 7 at night, and then there on Saturday mornings, there on Sundays and bank holidays. He will also have his own time. They talk in the papers about the proposal will provide an additional sport facility. No, it wouldn't. It isn't an additional facility, it's a replacement. And that is completely different. It's a replacement, it's not an additional facility. As I said, the residents should be entitled to their peace and quiet. You know, some will come home from work, some have given up work, and they want to sit there. These properties back onto that field. I was with Mr. and Mrs. Camus on Sunday evening. Their house number is number 2 Gordon, so it's nearest the pitch. There's a footpath that separates the playing field. That isn't an issue for them. There isn't an issue for the school using the facility. There isn't an issue for the school engaging with other schools in competitive matches. Whilst we can talk about the facility being used of an evening for training, that is fine for the schools. And we talk about junior teams on 9v9, so we're talking of under 11s. But what they're talking about is matches on a Saturday and a Sunday morning. Now, I don't know if anybody's ever been to a junior match of that age group, but believe you me, the chances of people maximising or being to a maximum of 35 to accommodate a car park is beyond belief. It will create problems. You've seen the pictures on a Sunday afternoon. You've seen how difficult it is to navigate around that particular area. The residents are concerned about what is there. The Lake Lister game has had to change because of this application, because planning wasn't requested at the appropriate time. So as you know, don't know about drainage, you know, traffic management plan, there is nothing. But what we are saying is, let the school enjoy the facility, but let the residents enjoy their peace and quiet, and don't have traffic going up and down this area all the time. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Shuttleworth. Are there any questions? Councillor Gloucester.
Just on the actual size of what we can see on that screen currently, how much bigger is it likely to be? I don't know who can answer that question, but I'm just trying to get a visualisation of what the difference will be in terms of how close to the houses it is.
The pitch itself is no closer. The pitch itself isn't the issue. The issue is the vehicles that will actually travel up and down to the ground. It's not the pitch. You can forget the fact it's an all weather pitch. That isn't the issue. It's the traffic volume that will go in there at different hours of the day.
So there's absolutely nothing that takes place at the weekends currently on that facility?
Well, there may be some school activity, but this isn't, we're not talking about school activity, we're not talking about denying the school and educational benefits. What we're actually talking about is the community come commercial use. That is the problem. That is what residents believe will impact on their residential amenity.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Shuttleworth. Okay, there's a couple of things here. I mean, it is a retrospective planning application, and that's come through in the wait list. But I have to say, really, that ought to have been identified sooner. I'm also, although I'm aware that the previous applications in the relevant history of the site were withdrawn, it is customary to include those. They've not been included in this. I think we need to look at that. I don't think they're material in how people decide, but for consistency, it's something that we need to look at. Has anybody got, we've listened to everybody, Councillor Berringridge.
Thank you, Chair. I think it's very clear the issue is access and parking. I think that's the thing that really is concerning everybody. I share Councillor Shuttleworth's concerns in that we haven't really had it, with nothing in this report that says what the volume of traffic is forecast to be. So whilst it talks about, some local clubs and it's only 9 aside or 7 aside, I'm not convinced that means there's only going to be 14 parents turn up. And I noticed that the highway comments say that they have to produce a parking management scheme. So it would seem exceptionally sensible to me that we have that before we make a final decision on this application. If they've got to do it to demonstrate that the car park at the school is adequate for the use that will be made outside school hours, why don't we get that information before we formally determine the application? So I will propose that we defer a decision, we ask for that parking management scheme to be produced and given to us and to the planning department, and then we'll be in a much stronger position to actually make a reasonable decision about whether this will exacerbate the existing problems, which I know from having been in that area are awfully bad. It's not an easy area to drive through, so I think we should ask for that information before we make a final decision. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, okay, before we do that, Councillor Hartnett, have you got a comment? Okay, so I think that's an eminently sensible suggestion, Councillor Brenridge. I think the whole, for me, the whole thing hinges on how traffic and security are managed on the site. There is absolutely no doubt it is an extremely tight site and already extremely, really busy. So I think that's a sensible suggestion. I think it's a reasonable suggestion. So it's been moved and seconded to be for deferral until we get that traffic management plan. So all those in favour of deferment, that's unanimous. Okay, thank you. Okay, if people wish to leave, we'll just have 30 seconds and then we'll move into the next item, which will be item number 10, Market Street Shaw. Yeah, sorry, yeah. No, because we've got 2 speakers on this one. Okay, I think we can start. Is Councillor Murphy here?
He's in the lease suite at the moment.
Right. Could we call him in because we're going to take the items? Would you mind? Would you go and get him? Yeah. Because if you leave the room, Councillor Hartness, you won't be allowed to take. Okay. Can go either way, John. Okay. If as I said, we've got two speakers, an applicant and a ward councillor. Could the case officers please introduce us to the item?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. This is an application concerning what originally was a public house and has been converted subsequently into retail units. There is also work being undertaken to create some residential accommodation on the first floor of the property. So this is the location. It's just on the end of the main shopping street in the centre of Shaw. As you can see, there's a property there. On the opposite side of the street, there are some more retail units, again with residential accommodation above there. And obviously there's a supermarket beyond the rear of the site. So it's a commercial location, but one which does contain existing residential accommodation. So you can see some of the existing alterations that have taken place on the property. This is to form the retail units, and obviously these frontages will form part of the new proposal, which is for a mix of two uses on the site, a restaurant and a hot food takeaway. This is just showing down the street, so again it's in a row of commercial properties. There are some other hot food premises within the local area, but within the core strategy there are policies which relate to the accumulation of those types of uses, both in terms of the run, if you like, of A5 hot food takeaway uses and the overall number in the local area. And as you'll see from the officer's report, neither of those criteria are exceeded in this particular instance. So again, this is just looking across the street and again showing the properties where, again, there's retail units on the ground floor and residential properties on the first floor, but again in the setting of a town centre. This is just giving an indication of the break-up of the uses. So again, you see from the colour scheme the separation between the hot food and the restaurant uses within there. And I think that is actually the extent of the information we've got on there. The other item to draw attention to is obviously the hours of opening. Again, because you have this mixed element within the local area, there's a condition proposed which would restrict opening of these premises until 11 o'clock, which again, it's in an area, there are existing hot food establishments, there are public houses nearby, and it's deemed that those are suitable hours in terms of the relationship with existing residential properties in the area. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Graham. Okay, so could I ask Simon Pilkington? Simon, who is the applicant?
That's right.
Good evening. I'm here to support our application for this project. In absence of our architect who I thought was coming, so I'm coming to support it instead. So I'll answer as many questions if there is any as I can. With the directors of a few businesses in this area, we're proposing a fish and chip shop and restaurant. We own businesses in Mr Thomas, as you might know it, Hollingworth Lake. We own that. We own a seafood restaurant in Harrogate. We've owned places in Skipton. We've owned places in Scarborough. So we're well versed in delivering a quality product, having sympathy for the local area and trying to blend in and enhance what we do. Main criteria being delivering a quality product to the local townspeople, creating jobs, sustainability, training and prospects for people, and that's what we do. So we believe our development will complement the town, further enhance the look of Market Street itself. One thing we noticed was that when we saw this unit, it's 3 separate units. Now our proposal is to take them all. I think Mr. Sarwar, who is the landlord, wanted to have 3 separate little businesses in there. Now we believe our proposal is much more sustainable, and you can imagine that much smaller businesses are going to find things a little bit tougher than one bigger one. And our covenant as well is quite strong. We've got proven track record. We've been in the business for 20 years. So we think we can provide a sustainable product there. What else have we got? The whole we're investing quite a lot of money in there, upwards of £150,000. Project managed by commercial equipment specialist. We're using good designers to give us a blend of contemporary and traditional design to the unit. We're using an extraction system which we feel is quite important. You mentioned the residents. Right. That's an important feature where it neutralises smells and odours, sound, and it blends in with the area. And there are residents above, and we believe what our proposal will not interfere with that at all. So I hope you consider that. A lot of Shore and Oldham residents also visit Hollingworth Lake. We believe we can keep them into the town as well, thus giving the spend in the town. Okay.
Are there any questions? Councillor Brownridge and then Councillor Gloucester.
So can I just ask a question about waste collection? Because there's a condition asking for details of storage and removal of waste. And I'm not clear because I don't know round the back. Is there, where are you going to put your bin? Is there
There's a storage area around the back where we propose to have mixed use wastage there and cardboard, etc. Yeah, okay. So it'll be that area at the back there. Okay. And there will be 2 1,100 litre bins on a commercial contract.
Thank you, Chair. Can I just ask, and this is my ignorance, I will say, obviously it was a licensed premises when you purchased the building. It's been changed to a retail premises. Is that the same use as a licensed premises?
No,
is this the second application that we've received?
Yeah, well, the pub was an A1 use, wasn't it? And then
I don't know.
Well, the landlord had changed it into the 3 units, and then we'd come along and our proposal, I think, suited him better, subject to your planning consent, which is taking all of those units, and that is an A3 and an A5, so it is a change again.
Okay, and in relation to Shoreham Centre, which it is very clearly in, the number of food outlets, chip shops, it's overrun with them, and obviously at Hollingworth Lake there aren't that level of competition. Do you actually feel it's a viable business proposition for the town centre of Shore in relation to the competition?
Well, we won't be spending upwards of £150,000 if we didn't. So yeah, we do.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I'll just clarify on the use element of it. In fact, planning permission for that change would now be required. I think we mentioned this at a meeting a couple of days. But at the time, you could change from a public house to a retail unit without planning permission.
Okay, any more questions? Okay, thank you, sir. Thank you. Councillor Murphy.
Thank you, members, for allowing me to speak. I've asked for this to come to the Planning Committee for your opinion, because I believe there is too many hot food takeaways in Shore Town Centre, and I believe that it would be harmful to the street scene and to the impact of this to the town centre. So I'm not just saying that off the top of my head. I do have a bit of evidence to support this. So I've done my research when it comes to town centres because I get my ear chewed quite a lot. There's too many takeaways in the town centre, too many charity shops. So whenever there's a takeaway, I take a particular interest of it. So when I did my count, there were 23 hot food takeaways in the town centre within 5 or 10 minutes. Now that doesn't include sandwich shops where you can get your spam and egg in the morning or your salad sandwich or whatever. If we were to do that, we're talking 29. So when I say about harming the street scene, I was after guidance from the planning committee members because I do believe this would be harmful to the street scene. And I'd ask the committee to either defer the application to do either a feasible study or whatever it is, just to confirm my findings, and I'd welcome your opinion on it because I do believe there are too many hot food takeaways. That doesn't include the restaurant, which is Share Wake, where you can get hot food. I've not seen anything in this application which makes me think it's bringing something new to the table. It is a hot food takeaway selling fish and chips. We've got them already, and I think we've got enough. So that's why I'm here to speak. Welcome any questions.
Okay, thanks. Are there any questions? Yeah, Councillor Ali.
Yeah, Councillor Murphy, I think here they're proposing a restaurant in addition to a takeaway, aren't they? So I mean, what about the restaurant figures? How many do we have insured? Do we have a lot of restaurants insured?
We currently have a restaurant which is fish and chips. It is called Dolphin Fish Bar, and it's on Rochdale Road, a stone's throw away. We have Armstrong's Fish and Chips, which is quite a popular takeaway, to be fair. And there is a Chinese chippy next door that sells fish and chips. There is plenty of fish and chip outlets. Restaurants, you mentioned, you've got Share Wake, which is, I've already mentioned, and there's an Indian takeaway, which is a stone's throw away, 5 minutes from the proposal, and about 10 minutes walk, 10-15 minutes walk from the town centre is another Indian restaurant. So maybe not fish and chip restaurants, but certainly outlets where fish and chips are sold, but there is a fish and chip shop in the town centre that's a restaurant.
I think with two speakers, I think the problem is there was some years ago there was a real big thing about too many, and particularly in the town centre, and we did manage to implement certain rules to try and guide this, and all of those rules are actually being complied with here. So in planning terms, there's not anywhere to go with this, Dave, and well, there isn't. I'm sorry. No, there's two more. I'll come back to it in a minute. I'm usually far more to say than that. Councillor Brownridge, you've got.
It's a question for the planning officer. It's really following up the point you've just made, because it says in the report, matter 1 of the SPD, there's been no evidence supporting need. So one assumes that criterion hasn't been met, and it doesn't say why that doesn't matter. And then the third one is about 10% of the frontage, and I just would like some clarification on how that's actually been calculated, because obviously this unit is three, isn't it? 3 frontages, if it's 3 units currently. So could you just clarify for me how that fact that it hasn't come to 10% is, or not two more than 2 next to each other, how you've actually calculated that? I'd just like some clarification, please.
Okay. In terms of needs, this is a policy set out in a document that predates the National Planning Policy Framework. In fact, we've had an appeal decision in the past where the inspector has basically indicated that that policy does not conform to national guidance, so to the post-dated national guidance. So although we still make obviously reference to it, it's not considered now that we can justify requiring people to demonstrate need in terms of these proposals, because, as I say, superseded by national guidance. In terms of the calculation of the 10% has been done on the block that's there. Now, you did say 3 units, but it's actually only in relation to hot food takeaways, not the restaurant. So it's actually only in relation to one of those 3 units, and it doesn't exceed the criteria in terms of that element of the policy.
Okay. Yeah. I see. Okay. I mean, it's one of these things. It's the way that town centres are changing, aren't they? We can all remember how that Market Street, even 10 years ago, there was all manner of different people, but people are obviously, the shops are closing because nobody's buying anything, and they close. It's very difficult to get that across to people who call you in the street, because I think every one of you has gets the same thing. But in the reality of it is that your wool shop, your fishing tackle shop, your shoe shop, they all closed because nobody went and bought anything there. And it's this type of use that people, although they might moan about it, actually go there. So we are up against it when it comes to explaining this to people who don't really understand the current, the situation. But you're quite right to come here and address the committee in the way you've done. And okay, if there's no more questions to Councillor Murphy, have you got a question?
It's actually for the planning officer. Sorry. Again.
We'll deal with that in a sec then. Okay, thank you, Dave. Thank you. Okay, Hazel, you've got a question.
Just going back to what was said previously, can you just explain that to me again on the calculations? Because I'm assuming that you would say the takeaway part would be at this side and then the restaurant at that side, but next door but one is a Chinese takeaway, which is fish and chips, and I didn't quite grasp what you were saying.
The indicated on the plans of those 3 units, so the first 2 which are on the end, on the corner, are the restaurant. The hot food unit will be the one on the left hand side where the taxi is parked in front. So that will be the hot food takeaway. What the policy says is that there can't be more than 2 hot food uses consecutively. So even if the next unit was a hot food takeaway, it would only not comply if the unit after that, so you had a row of 3 together. So you could have 2 together, and in that particular instance it does comply with that requirement.
Yeah, just to come in there, on a traffic issue really. I know this, the chippy obviously, and the associated traffic issues that we have with fast food takeaways, where people just parking up and running in and picking up and all the rest of it, and it's on a junction, as well as the residential above. Could I just have some clarification from traffic, if this has been thought through?
So the view I've taken with this one is I do appreciate it is near to the junction. There's parking behind, directly behind, so I didn't think I could refuse it for that reason. I do appreciate and acknowledge that people do tend to park up as close as possible and nip out. But I'm hoping in the car park behind is so close that I definitely wouldn't just nip in. I'd park on the car park. And there are a number of car parks nearby, and we have got the waiting restrictions as well until 6 o'clock. So I didn't think I could refuse for highway safety reasons in this instance.
Okay, any other comments? No? Okay. Councillor Hudson.
I think it's unfortunate, but we've got to realise that pubs and clubs and shops are closing because people go online in the 21st century, whether we like it or not. But that's what happens. So we've got to accept if somebody's willing to spend 150k. I can't believe in this day and age that anybody's doing that on a whim. They must be confident, or they must have done some check-ups on a business plan that they think this is worth spending and that it's a facility that people require. So I think we've got to accept, not only in Shaw, but in Leeds, in South. Leeds has a bigger hot food takeaway than anywhere I can remember in Leeds, but we were always told it wasn't a planning issue. So the problem's going to be in the middle of Oldham shortly, and some of you are more important than me. You're on the cabinet. You'll have to really wrestle with the fact that what do you want, empty properties, or do you want people in there providing money for the borough so you can regenerate? I think it's as simple as that, Chairman. But on a planning terms, it might not be what we want on personal terms, another chip shop, but I think we've got to look at this in planning terms and in regeneration terms. And the fact is, nobody's coming along to open shops and pubs these days. In fact, they're closing everywhere. And I think there's going to be a problem. We'll have to find another use for them. And if somebody comes along and pumps all this money in, we aren't losing anything. But it does help the Metropolitan Borough of Oldham if we accept these business people to provide this. So I think it's the best solution.
Yeah, it's just, yeah, okay. The fact is, we may not want this, and our people may not want to see more takeaways. The fact is, people are not coming along to open the traditional shops. But if you look at that, it's a very attractive. That isn't a garish, typical chicken shop type takeaway. That's quite an attractive building. You can see, and if somebody takes the trouble to build that, well, it almost follows, it should follow, that they'll look after it. We'll wind up now. Councillor Kumar, did you just want a quick comment?
I just wanted to move approval as a result of officer's recommendation.
Okay, well, it's been moved and seconded for approval, so all those in favour? Against? That is approved. Okay, thank you. We'll move on to the final item with speakers tonight, and it's item number 7, and we only have one speaker on this. This is 8789 Yorkshire Street, and we have a gentleman, Guy Barlow. Guy, if you want to come to the front, but we'll get we'll just get the officer to introduce it, and we'll let you. No, sorry, this is the applicant. Yeah.
Right, thank you, Chair. This is an application for currently vacant premises on Yorkshire Street. It was previously occupied with a bar on the ground floor and a nightclub on the upper floors. It and the building immediately adjacent are currently in a poor state of repair. In terms of assessing the application, the main issues obviously are the principle of the proposed use, which is essentially retaining the bar on the ground floor and converting the upper floors of the building, and an adjoining building at the rear which extends through to Bartland Place into residential accommodation of 12 self-contained flats. What that will do, obviously, increase housing supply in the local area, but we also need to look at any impact on the town centre and the existing uses, the impact on the amenity of the residents who will be moving into the use, and obviously then drawing our conclusions from that. So this is the site itself. It's on the north side of Yorkshire Street. The building you can just see in the top left-hand corner is the Coliseum Theatre, and just out of view is Fairbottom Street, just to the left of that. You can see Bartland Place at the back of the site, and the properties extending round there. So obviously people will know the town centre. They'll know there's a mix of restaurants, retail units, etc., and other drinking establishments in that area. This is to give you an indication of the particular scale of the property. The view you can see in the top left-hand corner is the view that you get from Yorkshire Street itself. You can see it's a 3-storey property. It then extends back, and you will see, in fact, at the bottom right-hand corner, so the building on the left-hand side there is the existing frontage building onto Yorkshire Street. You'll see then that the land levels rise towards the back, and you then have another building, a 2-storey building there, with a link structure adjoining those properties. And it's the area at the left-hand bottom side, that's your viewpoint of the building at the back of the site. And then obviously the opposite side in the top right-hand corner. So on 2 levels but linked through. So, and it is obviously a proposal to convert all of those properties into 12 self-contained units. So that's your view at the moment, obviously from the frontage of the site. That's giving you an indication of the current appearance of the property. In order to access the flats at the front of the site, there will be a separate doorway. So that will then provide a discrete entranceway rather than the entrances into the bar area at the moment. That's the view from the rear of the site. So again, you can see the separate building there, and the flats at the rear of the building will be accessed from that location. Waste will be kept within a storage area within the central section of the building, and that area there with the brick piers has a flat roof to it, and that would be an area that would be used as a kind of outdoor terrace area that provides access to some of the upper floor flats, and obviously also provides an amenity area for the future residents. These are just to give you how clear these will be, just an impression really, they're not really that clear, of the state of the building, and obviously the benefits of bringing activity back into that property. This is from the terrace area, so we're up on that flat roof section. The doorway you can see on the right hand side, that will lead down to Bartland Place, and that will provide the access stairway into the units on the lower floor, and also then into the building on the left hand side, and in the roof space of there will be a final apartment as well. So it's making practical use of the whole of the building. This is just showing you again the condition of that terraced area and a view out towards the back of the site. This is the access to one of the units, and this is effectively at the back of the Colosseum. So this is an area which is shared with the Colosseum for their waste storage, and there is a right of access through this area. This is just the existing layout areas within the basement site, and now the proposed layouts. So you can see the ground floor of the property on Yorkshire Street, that will be retained for the A4 drinking establishment use. You then go up to, and you'd see on the, so we're on the second view on the left hand side, you can see a stairway going up there, that'll lead up to the flats. So these are the 2 flats on the, again, the images that you can see, different colours indicating the flats themselves. There's a gap between those flats, and then you get to the buildings at the back. So these, of course, are the ones at the top of the page. And again, you can see that there are flats on the ground floor level, on the first floor level, and as indicated in that pitch roof space on the immediate right-hand side, a further unit. In the central image, you can see an area white in the centre, and that area includes an area for waste storage, but is also intended to provide some small storage units that could be used for other retail units and other businesses in the local area, and they're all accessed from the rear of the site, and that really is taking you back. So proposal effectively is for conversion of the building on its upper floors into 12 self-contained flats. The main issues are in connection with the suitability of that use, both in terms of the quality of the accommodation itself and the size of that accommodation, and the impact of the activity that takes place in that surrounding area on the amenity of those residents. You'll see in the report there are effectively 2 objections to the application. One of those has come from the Coliseum Theatre itself, and that's particularly in relation to their, if you like, their ongoing activities. So when they take out waste bottles and so on at the end of performances, that will be in a yard area which is immediately adjacent to the building. They also, when they have new productions move in, those set changes take place at the weekend in the early hours. But they obviously, as you know, will be every 4 or 6 weeks and so on. So this isn't a regular activity, but will take place nevertheless at antisocial hours. The main concern in relation to noise, however, is in respect of the other late night entertainment uses which are in the local area. None of those immediately adjoin the premises, but there is this focus of uses around Fairbottom Street and a number of nightclubs there which open into the early hours at weekend and on Thursdays, and the level of activity associated with those has been deemed to be problematic by your environmental health officers. As a result, we've asked for detailed information in terms of the acoustic insulation that will be provided to those flats. And you'll see both in the detail of the report and in the additional information that you received today that that information is not deemed sufficient by my environmental health colleagues in terms of the standard of insulation to be provided. It requires that windows of those rooms will be kept closed during those periods of high noise. Now, there are ways of providing for that with a passive ventilation system, but the proposal in this instance would be minor in terms of its benefit. There are alternative ways of doing that, and that would be a more comprehensive system which would take in the whole building rather than focusing on individual units. But clearly that has some implications both in terms of cost and in terms of the space that would be needed to accommodate that within the building. You'll see from some of the information put forward there's some indications that obviously there are other flats in the local area. There's a permission granted on Horsehead Street, in fact the building just at the top right area for conversion into residential accommodation. Those are either further away from where the main activity takes place. In a number of instances they are premises that have either been converted in the past under permitted development rights. In fact, there's one just slightly further down Yorkshire Street that has benefited from that, or others which through established use have that particular purpose. It's accepted that if you live in a town centre, you will not expect the same level of amenity that you would expect if you were in on a quiet suburban street. But nevertheless, there need to be minimum standards that need to be adhered to. It is considered it is feasible, but we've not been provided with that level of information. Similarly, we've not been provided with the sufficient level of information in terms of potential noise nuisance from the ground floor unit, which again is presently vacant, but could be reopened, and we understand from the applicant that is the intention. So there is a lack of information to demonstrate that the amenity of those residents in terms of noise nuisance will be adequate. The second issue which is associated with that is the size of the units that are proposed. Now, members will be aware from previous meetings reference to national standards for minimum of accommodation. Oldham Council can't use those. You're required to have a policy in your local plan, and those standards post-date our local plan. So we can't use them. However, and this has been shown in a recent appeal decision, it is a guide, and it is a good guide to what are deemed to be suitable levels of accommodation. In this particular instance, none of the units would meet those standards. Some of them come fairly close, but some of them are very short. So for instance, for some of the units you need a minimum of 50 square metres. Some of those units are 37 square metres. And therefore, added to the issue of noise, so effectively looking at residents who First of all, for instance, we'd have to have the windows closed to keep that, but also have limited space within there. So it's not like, I don't know, if you're on a residential street and your neighbours are having a party, you can go in the back bedroom and so on. They don't have the luxury of that. And we feel that those aspects together make this an unsuitable proposal in its detail, but in terms of the benefits of bringing back into practical use a property within the town centre and an area where obviously it's difficult to find uses on first floors, with the correct scheme, we feel that this could be acceptable in principle, but that we're not there at the present time and that we could not support the application for the reasons set out in the report. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Would you go and invite the speaker now?
I want to say something you just said. Is it not under consideration that the Coliseum are moving?
John, we'll deal with that. It actually is in the report, that, but we'll come to that later. We'll invite the applicant to speak now. Okay, sir? You've probably figured out now you've got 3 minutes. We'll remind you when you've 30 seconds.
Good evening, committee. Thank you for your time. Our proposal, as you've heard, is to convert the former Scruples nightclub into a multi-use facility which will contain a high-end wine bar, Prosecco bar to the ground floor, 12 apartments and a number of self-storage units for the local traders in the centre. The expected budget of this from private investment is just short of £1 million of our own private money going in. We have spent approximately 8-9 months on this project now and went through the pre-planning application, spent a lot of time with submitting plans. Within that, we presented a scheme to start with, which was 14 units, and on the recommendation of Mr. Irvine, the other planning, this was asked if we could reduce down to 12 units and achieve the 35 to 37 square metres, that would be acceptable, and that's what we did. We redrew the plans to that schedule. Documentary evidence was provided to Mr. Dickman yesterday to put in your packs with emails of that nature to back up that evidence before we then proceeded the plans. We then we then sort of took out a independent 3-day sound report. So conscious to what Mr. Dickman said, that we've not actually done this. Mr. Dickman required us to do this report, which we carried out. That report and its subsequent annex that was actually sent 2 days ago said there should be no reason whatsoever for any other methods of sound insulation other than standard insulation that would be required by building regulations that we could adhere to. And we are quite happy to make any sort of stipulation within the planning application to actually make sure that our application is subject to making sure that our building and the building regs that we're going to do to this meets up to code. We don't want to build substandard properties. We are a professional outfit. This is now our 3rd project in the centre of Oldham. It's bringing our spend now to about £2.5 million into the centre of Oldham. This project will bring back a site that is delisted for rates, not producing Oldham Council any money. It will actually bring over a 10-year period in excess of £250,000 back in council tax and rates, and it will create at least a dozen jobs on top of the other 35 jobs we created in the town centre already on other projects. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I mean, I think the officer report highlighted a number of issues. Just to sort of want to pick up on one of them, the size. I think what the NPPF rules is, the ideal size is 50 metres squared per flat.
No, that's actually incorrect. It's 50 metres for a duplex apartment, and our duplex apartment is 47 square metres. So it's basically the one-bedroom flat, the DP site is actually 44 square metres as a national guideline. If you actually then go to 2, it can be interpreted which way you want. For a one-bed unit, which is what these are. The required size of 44 square metres, which are able to be reduced if the amenity is needed within the community. Very much like you've actually got within Oldham Town Centre micro apartments, that was 144 micro apartments with a starting square foot meterage of 18 square metres, which was approved by this committee.
Okay, so it's a balancing act one, this one, isn't it? Very much so. Councillor Brownridge.
Well, I think Mr Dickman summed up very clearly what the issues are, and I'm entirely willing to move that we accept the recommendation on the grounds that I cannot believe an application's been put in without a full detailed noise survey about mitigation measures. It's incredible. That's going to be such a crucial issue to this, and we should have all of that information should be before us so we can make a proper decision, as we haven't got. It's all very well saying, oh, it'll comply with building regs, and yes, we'll do it, but we need to know exactly what's being done and then to decide whether what's proposed actually works, and we don't know that. And I do not approve of people having to live in such tiny units. It's not acceptable in the 21st century. It's taking advantage of the fact there's a housing crisis and people are desperate. And I don't think we should sign up to that. We should stick out to our guns and have decent quality, good-sized accommodation, particularly in the town centre. If we want to encourage people to live there, I mean, you know, it's just I'm sorry, I just think we should just say no unless we get a lot more information that demonstrates this can actually work properly.
Okay, just before I take the next, just in the interest of transparency, I think the applicant is telling us that he has submitted that information. Could you, as our professional officers, tell us is that the case or not?
Yeah, we have to be fair to Mr Barlow. He has commissioned an acoustic report and that information has been submitted. However, in response to that, the Environmental Health Officer has said that the information that's being produced and that the methodology for dealing with the noise is not satisfactory. And obviously, therefore, we're saying you need to go away, you need to come back with more. So, yes, not right to say they've ignored us, but they've not come up with sufficient information to satisfy us.
And I think that's crucial in this case, because I think the noise issue, while carries a lot of weight in deciding this, anyone choosing to take an apartment in a town centre will probably be aware there's noise, and I think it's reasonable to say that they would have to put up with some of that and would know that. My concern is the size of the apartments, and we've said this several times, haven't we? We may have done micro apartments in the past, but I think it's just when you combine when you've got the combination of the noise issues and the very small apartments, I think we need to know, we need a bit more on this, needs a bit more working on. I don't know what's gone on between Steve Irving and the developer. We can only consider what's before us today, and they are too small for what we want. So has anybody got any more comments? Councillor Kumar.
Yeah, I have a few issues actually. Obviously, it's been mentioned by the applicant that there's 30-35 has been okayed by Steve Irving. He's not here to defend his case, so we don't know whether that's true or not. So that's a discussion between the developer and our chief officer, really, Steve Irving. The other problem I have is the acoustic report has been submitted 2 days ago. It's not been presented to us here now. If it wasn't for the applicant actually stating the fact, again, like Barbara was quite rightly saying, we don't have that information. Now, although I do agree that some of these apartments are small in size, I think we defer this application to get the full information back, what this committee is entitled to. And if at a later stage, if both parties, our officers and the applicant can't sort of act out, then we make a final decision on it. But I just think at this stage we do not have enough information for a refusal.
Yeah, just because in terms of the acoustic information, the information that's just been produced is, if you like, a follow-up. So we've had an acoustic report and some recommendations from that. That's gone to our environmental health colleagues who've said that's not sufficient. Mr Barlow's acoustic consultant doesn't agree with that, and that's what you've got there. He's there saying, no, we think you're wrong. I put that back to environmental health and they've said, no, we believe we're right. So it is a case that, you know, we've asked for additional information, and I think the applicant's approach is, no, it meets building regulations, it meets other standards, and we've not received the information we previously asked for. In terms of what Steve Irving had discussed, there was reference to evidence. Well, I haven't seen any evidence to the contrary of what I've seen in terms of correspondence. And that correspondence, Steve clearly says that, yes, as we've all said, brilliant, let's hope we can bring this back, but that it needs to meet those national standards. And there is an email from the agent which says it will meet those national standards. Where it falls down is that all the units are 2 beds, if you like, they're double bed units. And the members who were around when we had a discussion about, I think it was one of Richard's applications previously, about people stopping overnight and so on, you know, they could alter the plans and show single beds. If they did, they'd meet all the standards because there'd be a single unit. There is no way we can enforce that. It's clear that they're intended to be large enough for 2 people to occupy those, and in that sense they do not meet the size standard that is required. So it's, you know, you can't control the individual number of people who stay there. You know, you say, we try and put a condition saying each flat is for 1 person. We can't enforce that.
John?
I'll say what I said when that application came, that it's a shame. I think it's right to bring it back and have a discussion and tell them what are the minimum standards we expect. I'm just sorry that the Cabinet members of Oldham Metropolitan Borough submit an application for microflats farther down the road that didn't meet these standards, and I grumbled then and I'll grumble now, and I'll say it's opened up an old can of worms, because I said to Mr. Irvine, how do we justify what we did there in the name of Oldham Metropolitan Borough Council, and we're telling these people we won't accommodate them. So I will second Councillor Kumar's thing to defer it and give them a chance to come back and meet the standards that are required. I think if we tell them what the minimum standards are, it's up to them, and then bring it forward, and if we don't think we've met them, we can refuse it. But I think at least we should give them the same chance as we gave the Metropolitan Borough Council.
I think just on that point, obviously in order to comply, we will be dealing with a same use but a different scheme, so it'll be a lesser number of units. If the application is determined, if it's refused, then if they have to reduce it, say in order to meet these they have to produce 10 flats or whatever, they'll get another go, and they'll get a free go on submitting an application, and we'll be able to deal with that, because even the acoustic information will have to be altered. So obviously it's for members to decide, but I think on the scheme you've got, you need to decide on this scheme. If we need to come back with another proposal, then we need to deal with that afresh with the information that's necessary for that.
Okay. Well, it has been moved and seconded for deferment, so can I have a show of hands for...
Can I just say something there? They wouldn't get, if it's a material difference in size, they wouldn't get another free go. They'd have to... They don't get if it's a material difference in size, they don't.
Yeah, all we told you about is the proposal is for 12 self-contained apartments. If, as they rejigged it, they ended up with 10, then effectively it's all about, is it the same type of description? Well, it's not exactly the same type of description because the numbers changed, but we would treat that as being effectively a free go as an application. So, but again, it's obviously that's for members. If members
I'm sorry, officer, but that wouldn't be in line with other applications that I've been involved with in the past on the Oldham Metropolitan Borough. I think it's unfair for it'd be unfair to the other applications that I've been dealing with in the past.
Okay, well,
I think it's
Councillor Kumar, we are not we're not the legal team here. We have to deal, what you're saying is fair enough, but it's not for us to deal with. We need to make a decision today. We need to make a decision today based on what's in front of us. And we can either defer it or we can go with the officer's recommendation. So it's been moved and seconded for deferral. So can I have a show of hands for deferral? Yeah, against deferral? Okay, the item is deferred.
Can I still have clarified?
You can have that outside the meeting, yes, with pleasure, but not today. We or the full information or expertise to do that today. But yes, you can have it. No.
Well, I don't know the answer to that because that's so I wouldn't be able to answer it today. Yeah.
Okay. Right, we'll move on to the remaining two items. And item number 6, Gordon Street, Cheriton. I just propose to move that. I presume everybody's read the report, so I've got a move. I'll move that. It's been seconded by everybody. So all those in favour? That's unanimous. And likewise with the land at Royley, this is exactly what we want. Again, I'm going to move. I'm going to move approval. I've got a seconder. All those in favour? That's unanimous. Thank you. Will you please note the appeals? There's some interesting decisions, and there's a decision in there which links very closely to the item we've just discussed regarding Yorkshire Street. So that if you have a look at that, it could be quite interesting. Thank you for your attendance, and we'll see you at the next meeting.